And hi, how are you? It's a pleasure to be here with you tonight, speaking about this exhibition. I would like to thank the Kalamazoo Institute of Arts and its team, Director Belinda Tate, Chief Curator Rahima Barber, Associate Curator Catherine Ramsbottom, Assistant Curator of Youth and Family Programs Jessica Sundstrom, Assistant to the Director Laura Wilson, as well as the entire team of international arts and artists. Cultural Encounters, Art of the Asian Diasporas to Latin America and the Caribbean, 1945 to the present. I would like to begin this presentation tonight with this quote by Patricia Mohammed. Rather than seeing the region as a collection of civilizations that were forced into submission to each other, I imagine the space as rebirth of living as a rebirth of I imagine the space as the rebirth of living cultures, regenerated by synthesis and hybridity. And that is precisely what Cultural Encounters is about, a presentation of art that reveals the complex artistic richness of the Asian diasporas to the region, replete with the synthesis and hybridity that Mohammed mentions, as well as histories of diasporas that were not yet widely known. This exhibition frames artworks as an active historical document, revealing the multiple layers of complex and evolving cultural exchanges that have shaped the modern multi-ethnic societies of today. The rich, multi-layered cultural fabric of Latin America and the Caribbean cannot be fully understood without acknowledging the remarkable diversity of cultural threads woven by the migratory influx from East, South, Southeast, and Southeast Asia. Cultural Encounters offers a fascinating glimpse of modern and contemporary art through an exploration of migratory flows from Japan, China, India, and Indonesia, as well as their significant artistic impact in their host countries, which include Argentina, Brazil, Cuba, Guyana, Jamaica, Panama, Peru, Mexico, Trinidad and Tobago, and Suriname. Although the initial Asian migrations to Latin America and the Caribbean dates from the 16th century, it was not until the mid-18th century that it began on a large scale, flooding in from multiple countries to fill the labor shortages caused by the abolition of slavery in the Caribbean colonies in the 1830s. The new Latin American republics, Brazil, Panama, Peru, Argentina, and Mexico, along with the Spanish and English and Dutch empires, began to import Asian indentured servitude, in most cases as a low-wage workforce for agriculture. After indentureship ended, other migratory waves took place with the arrival of new populations until today. One of the aims of this exhibition is to showcase the role of the Visual Arts Department of the Organization of the American States, or OAS, predecessor to the Art Museum of the Americas, in recognizing the contribution of Asian diaspora to Latin America and the Caribbean as early as 1961, with the groundbreaking exhibition Japanese Artists of the Americas. By periodically showing seminal works of Japanese, Brazilian, Peruvian, and Mexican and Argentine artists, as well as actively collecting them. The OAS has established an evolving canon of modern Latin American art. Similarly, in 1972, with the exhibition Contemporary Art from the Caribbean, Barbados, Jamaica, Trinidad, and Tobago, the OAS addressed the centrality of Indian and Chinese traditions within the crucible elements that has shaped Caribbean culture and society. I would like to add the pamphlet that you see in this slide, Tribute to Picasso, Homenaje a Picasso, that features one of the pieces in the exhibition by Trinidadian artist M.P. Aladdin. So today I would like to highlight some of the sections of the exhibition, and I would like to start with Japan. And I would like to talk about Brazil. In 1908, the transatlantic ship Casato Maru anchored at Port of Santos in Brazil, state of Sao Paulo, bearing the very first contingent of Japanese migrants contracted to work on Brazil's coffee plantations. The Japanese migration to Brazil can be divided into three stages: the intensive influx period from 1908 to 1924, the restriction period from 1942 to 1953, in which immigration was restricted due to Japan's role in World War II, and the post-war period from 1952 to the 1960s, during which Brazil authorized 9,000 Japanese families to work on agricultural development. Today, the legacy of the vast Japanese Brazilian community has truly permeated the cultural landscape of Sao Paulo. A cultural boon of the migration was the creation of the Sebi Akai, a powerful coalition of Japanese Brazilian artists that by 1965 had more than 300 subscribers, ranging from sculptors to painters. Manabu Mabe was born in Japan and immigrated to Brazil with his family in 1934 at the age of 10. Much of his youth was spent working on a coffee plantation, where, to his father's disapproval, he spent much of his free time sketching and painting. In 1947, Mabe and other artists re-established the collective Sebi Akai group, which not only helped to shape his career, but also enable his support to other Japanese artists in Brazil. Mabe began to receive recognition for his artwork as early as the 1950s, and in 1957 sold his farm and moved to Sao Paulo, finally dedicating his life fully to art. Although his early work in the 1950s depicts figurative subjects, such as landscapes, he also experimented with geometry as a way to minimize the role of figures on the canvas, perhaps as a response of the emerging Brazilian neo-concrete art movement. Mabe's mature style is characterized by bursts of color and line upon color block monochromatic backgrounds. His unique approach to informalism incorporates the graceful lines of his study of Japanese calligraphy while echoing the evoking strokes of Zen Buddhist painting. I had the opportunity to visit Kazuo Wakabayashi's home and studio and chat with him about his work and how Manabu Mabe was a central figure uniting Japanese Brazilian artists. Actually, their homes are side to side. Born in Kyoto, Japan in 1931, Kazuo Wakabayashi was already a trained artist when he emigrated to Sao Paulo in 1961. There, he became an influential member of the Japanese Brazilian artistic community, joining the Sebi Akai group. His work from the 1960s and the 1970s can be categorized as informalist, while also adhering to geometric principles, and it's marked by thick texturized surfaces and abstract monochromatic forms. Regarding this first period, he had explained that his goal was to detach himself artistically from the Japanese tradition and look for what he calls the real Brazilian heart. And the work, and the blue work is the work that I would like to highlight today. Now let's go to Peru. After Brazil, Peru is the host of the second largest Japanese population in South America, with approximately 80,000 inhabitants of Japanese descent. The Japanese legacy in Peru goes back to the 19th century, when the shortage of indigenous labor led the Peruvian planters to reach out to Asian countries for migrant workers. In 1899, the first Japanese immigrants arrived in a group of 790 to work on Peru's cotton and sugar plantation. The artist that I would like to highlight today is Carlos Runzi Tanaka. And this is a picture of when I went to visit his studio in Peru. Carlos Runzi Tanaka is of Japanese, English, and Peruvian descent. His maternal grandfather, Guillermo Shinichi Tanaka, emigrating from Japan in the 1920s, but died young, never meeting his grandson. Tanaka's grandmother, however, sought to preserve her late husband's heritage by instilling in their family a reverence for Japanese culture. In 1994, Tanaka began a series of installations based on concepts of memory, journey, and displacement, using crafts constructed from origami, ceramic, and glass as metaphors for the Japanese immigrant experience. Tanaka linked his sculptural work to the legacy of his Japanese grandfather he never knew. The idea of using the crab as a migratory symbol came to him after seeing at the Cerro Azul beach in Peru a monument to the Japanese immigrants that was surrounded by crabs. Now let's go to another section of the exhibition. We're gonna start talking about China. And I would like to start this section with Cuba. The Chinese diaspora to Latin America and the Caribbean was a two-way process. On the one hand, it fueled a demand for contracted labor following the end of the African slave trade. For example, to fuel the boom Cuban sugar industry. On the other hand, a colonial expansion within China itself fostered internal movements that facilitated the migrations. The contract laborers, known as coolies, were drawn almost entirely from the vicinity of the Pearl River Delta, notably from the city of Canton. In Cuba, an initial period of open migration was inaugurated in 1847, when Cuba was still a Spanish colony, but it came to a swift end in 1877, when the Treaty of Peking, which prohibited the transportation of Chinese people to Cuba under labor contracts. Chinese immigrants soon established niches within laundry and produce industry and built the Chinatown district in Havana, which at its peak supported 2 movie theaters, a cultural club, and several Chinese language newspapers. The Cuban Chinese community maintained strong ties with their cultural traditions and beliefs. And the artist that I would like to highlight right now is Flora Fong. Flora Fong was born to a Cantonese father in Camagüey, Cuba. In the 1980s, following her intense study of Chinese art and calligraphy, first in Havana and then in China, her work evolved in a strikingly new direction. In an interview, she recalls her overwhelming curiosity to explore her heritage, a process she undertook independently and which became a point of departure for her mature work. Fong questions the fact that she was taught only Western art at school and reflects on her late but revelatory study of Chinese art. And I quote, "In books and reproduction, I was struck by the skill reflected in the treatment of landscapes, the perception, the synthesis, the profound content conveyed by spatial relationship, the way they could paint flowers with just one brushstroke." End of quote. Her study of Chinese calligraphy allowed her to use Chinese characters to depict ideas as well as visual motifs. For instance, she uses the logogram of the forest to represent the Cuban tropical forest in her work. In an extensively and evocably, she uses Chinese characters for person, wind, sun, rain, cloud, mouth, garden, and mountain. Her works combine a diversity of subjects, such as the legacy of the Chinese immigrant in the island, specifically the experience of her father, the ship as a symbol of the arduous journey by which Chinese immigrants made their way into the Americas, and more contemporary themes such as Chinese cuisine. She combines subjects with symbols and themes that are typical of the island, such as the palma real, that you can see in this work at the center of the chair, the rooster, and most importantly, the Caribbean cyclone. And you can see how this, you can see that the palm has this shape that is mimicking this idea of the cyclone, which is omnipresent in Fang's work, and she describes herself as a cyclone in motion. So I would like to pose here with these three works a conversation with the artists that are related to Cuba in this exhibition, and highlight how yellow becomes a common denominator in these three artists. And it's actually very easy to see while seeing the exhibition at IKEA. And while studying the work of Karina Wong, she said that that yellow color that she uses, and that you can see that is also present in the wall of Wilfredo Lam and Flora Fong, in her case is inspired by the tiles of the colonial houses in Cuba. And I think that shade of yellow in the three works come exactly from that Cuban influence. So now let's go to Panama. The first significant wave of migrations from China arrived in Panama in the 1850s, attracted by the California gold rush. This influx brought new life to the dormant project of linking Panama and the United States by way of an interoceanic railroad, whose completion was largely depending on the labor of the Chinese immigrants. Panama soon became a bustling transit point between China and such destinations such as United States, Cuba, and Peru. Amidst racial tensions, the Chinese community built a prosperous Chinatown district that in 1970 reached its cultural and economic zenith. Today, Panama City has a new Chinatown, and the influx of immigrants from China continues to be steady. So the artist that I would like to highlight for Panama is Samuel Rumaldo Choi. Rumaldo Choi was born in 1990 in Panama City to a Chinese Panamanian family. His grandfather arrived at the port of Colón in Panama from Canton in the 1930s, eventually supporting himself as a cook, a vocation that has left a deep impression in the Choi family, whose family events still revolve around Chinese dining traditions. This custom also appears as a vivid motif in Rumaldo's Choi artwork. And not only in his work, there is another artist in the exhibition, Laura from Prosper, that has a video piece that also depicts the ritual of all the family eating around the Lazy Susan. Raised in an extended family of multi-ethnic artists, Rumaldo Choi took the curatorial lead of creating the #Panachina project, inviting his cousins Manuel Choi, Cisco, and Rosendo Merel Choi, all part of this exhibition, in addition to some other young artists like Laura from Prosper, part of this exhibition, to continue work evocative of their experience as members of the Panachina community in Panama. Rumaldo Choi has developed an innovative work rooted in the tradition of Chinese food in Panama, exploring how This foreign cuisine and its customs have syncretized with local food traditions. A local maxim has said that, and I quote, "There is nothing more Panamanian than a Chinese breakfast." In Pancho, the artist presents a typical Chinese lazy Susan that proffers both Chinese and Panamanian food, creating his own version of authentic Chino-Panamanian meal. And one of the picture that you see here of a restaurant, I put it in the slide because when I went to meet the artists and their studios and research for the exhibition, every single meeting that I have with them took place in a restaurant. Every single one. From lunch, dinner, snacks, breakfast. So now let's go to another section of the exhibition, and let's go to Trinidad. Let's go to India and highlight Trinidad and Tobago. With the waning of Chinese migration, British authorities next looked to East India as a source of indentured labor in Trinidad's plantations. Most of the recruits came from Bihar and Uttar. On May 30th, 1845, now known as Arrival Day, the transatlantic boat Fad al-Razak arrived to Trinidad with 225 indentured workers, the first ripple of what would be a massive wave of Indian migration. By 1917, the indenture system was abolished, and the flow of East Indian laborers to the island nation came to an end. The assimilation of Indian culture in Trinidad was relatively slow, complex, and syncretic process due to its more gender-balanced demographics. Labor recruited in India often ship entire families whose language, castes, and religions, primarily Hinduism and Islam, were important familial bonds. And it's important to clarify that in the case of the Chinese migrations, most of the workers were male workers instead of the entire family. So some of you already know this piece by Wendy Nanan, but it's a great example to talk about the influence of this migratory process. So Wendy Nanan was born in Port-au-Prince to an Indian family. Though raised in a Presbyterian household, she was able to absorb Hindu culture and rituals through her extended family. Upon completion of her BFA in painting, Nanan discovered an urge to construct with her hands and has worked with paper mache ever since, creating three-dimensional pieces into which she sometimes incorporates found or ready-made objects. A frequent subject of her work is daily life in post-colonial Trinidad and Tobago. Other subjects include the multicultural richness of the island and her own femininity. In her piece, Baby Krishna, Nanan assembled three papier-mâché blue Krishnas with wings, each carrying different objects. For instance, the scholar Patricia Mohammed notes that in Hinduism, blue is the color of infinity. Hence, it is used to represent Indian deities. But also, the blue is traditionally used in Trinidad to depict dark-skinned South Asian people. The wings of Nanan's Krishnas, meanwhile, are borrowed from the angels of Christian tradition. The first of the Krishnas holds in one hand an enamel tin cup of tea, and in the other, doblez, a Trinidadian street sandwich made of flat bread and curry garbanzos. The second Krishna holds a green map of Trinidad with the red marks and sign of Om. And the third carries the island's national bird, the scarlet ibis, and on the other hand, a dove. The other has a mountainous salt which was given to the sugarcane plantation workers. I also would like to invite you to see this short documentary on Wendy Nanan by Andil Gosain, in which you can hear more about her story. Now let's go to Guyana. The Asian migration to Guyana resembles in many respects the contemporaneous Asian migrations to Suriname and Trinidad and Tobago. The first two migrants vessels to arrive from Calcutta, the Whitby and the Hesperus, docked in Guyana in May 5, 1838, with more than 300 men, 11 women, and 17 children. Despite the racial and cultural discrimination under which they were forced to live during their servitude, Guyana's Indian migrants, predominantly Hindus with small minority of Muslims, were generally allowed to maintain their traditions and religions. By 1917, when the internship was finally eliminated, Indians had settled in Guyana, making them the largest ethnic group in the island. In the inland Caribbean country. Guyana is not an island. The artist that I would like to highlight for this section is Suchitra Matai. Suchitra Matai's family has its roots in the wave of Indian immigrants who arrived to Guyana over a century ago to work as indentured servants. An immigrant herself, Matai left Guyana when she was 3 years old and has since lived in Canada, India, and the United States. While pursuing her PhD in South Asian art, she opted to become a full-time artist. Matai is a multimedia artist who works with painting, collage, installation, video, and sculpture. Her materials range from found paintings and clippings from Natural Geographic to needlepoint and embroidery. Matai's highly conceptual pieces deal with issues of identity and the role of women in the arts while challenging suppressive narratives such as those associated with colonialism. El Dorado, after all, a work of woven mixed media is based on El Dorado, the legendary kingdom of gold sought by conquistadors. Matai explores the idea of home and colonization while referencing the weaving practice of her mother and grandmothers, which she uses as a metaphor of interlacing of cultures. So we can see here some of the details of her work, very detailed, very delicate. So last but not least, I would like to talk about the Indonesian migration to Suriname. The indentured workers who came to the inland Caribbean country to work in its sugar, coffee, and cotton plantation originated from 3 distinct Asian countries: China, India, and Indonesia. The first major Japanese migration workers to Suriname began in 1880. Despite the Dutch colonization of Java, migrant labor in Suriname had generally come from East India through British companies, as the importing of Javanese labor was more costly. Nevertheless, the Javanese migration was part of a new political effort by the Dutch to become less dependent of the British colonial government in India. A second wave of migration from Java took place from the 1930s through the end of World War II. This initiative encouraged entire families to settle in Suriname to help populate the country. So the artist that I highlighted for today's presentation is Reiner Asmodrejo, who was born in Paramaribo, Suriname, to a family of Javanese descent. Asmodrejo's brushstrokes full of color and energy share similarities with those of Cuban artist Wilfredo Dam, also represented in this exhibition. Asmodrejo's canvases are full circles, which variously serve as symbols of the sun, fertility, and the eternal cycle of life. Woman as a principle of eternal energy is frequently seen in his work. Another is the cultural richness of Suriname. As he explains, and I quote, "Maroon women in traditional garb, dancing or at work, traditional elements from my Javanese background are particular favorites in my work." And to end this presentation, I would like to invite you to visit the exhibition. And while you are looking at the exhibition, I encourage you to visit the website Cultural Encounters that will show you more works of these artists. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much, Adriana. And just really quick, I think that I found the right documentary link for the Wendy Danan. You said it was with Andil Gosin, right?
Yes.
Yes, so I think I did. That was so much great information, and what an exciting teaser for the exhibition. And hopefully that got everybody's appetites curious to come and see the rest of the works in person. So for this portion of the program, I would love to invite anyone that might have a question for Adriana about this exhibition. You can either unmute yourself, or you can type a question into the chat and I can read it out loud, or Adriana can. Marco?
Question, yeah. Hi, thanks Adriana for your presentation. It's a nice introduction to see all these artists and all the encounters that you are presenting to us. My question is related to the generational aspect of the artists. If you can tell us something about some of the artists that you are including in the exhibition arrived to the Americas at the 1950s, 1940s, and some of other artists are a second generation, maybe a third generation of artists radicating in the Americas. So can you tell us something about if you are perceiving a difference in how they are looking at these relations between the continents?
Thank you, Marco Polo. It's so nice to see you here. Marco Polo is actually a fellow at the Art Museum of the Americas, so it's great to have him here. It is a great question. So we are talking about artists that arrived, yes, that naturalized and became, in the case of Brazil, Brazilians. And then we're talking about third, second, fourth, and fifth generations in some cases. And what you can see in the range of the work is that in the case of Brazilian artists that directly arrived, they had a pretty close conversation to Japan, going to Japan, exhibiting there, coming back and forth. So for example, Kazuo Kobayashi, when I met him, I realized that his Portuguese was not as good, that he actually used constantly Japanese words in our conversation. But he tried to escape from his Japanese heritage at some point in his career, and he tried to use elements that he found in Brazil. But then we have other different generations that have that use the traditions and the heritage in very different ways. So, and you can see, for example, in the work of Wendy Nanan, in which she is able to use that, to show that hybrid language and that syncretism with the baby Krishnas. But you can also, and Samuel Choi, for example, with the dinner table, the Lazy Susan, putting both types of meals at the same time. In other artists, you can see that they are pre-linked to their family traditions. So how Suchitra Matai uses weaving as part of her artwork come from that's something that she saw growing up. So it comes and goes in different levels, and that's why I like to think these pieces as historical documents that can show us and how they shed light to the different aspects of how the different artists approaches these different vocabularies depending of where they came from.
Great question, thank you. Would anyone else like to ask a question? And maybe while you're thinking about one, I have a question. I've noticed since I've gotten to see the sneak peek of the exhibition already, that there's quite a few textile works in this exhibition. And I do personally embroidery, so I'm really excited to see textile work. But what was your thought process about including embroideries and weavings and other works when you were looking at your collection?
Well, thank you, Jessica. And I think that comes from the fact that as I wanted to use these pieces as historical documents, as well as for their stylistic value and meaning, I wanted to show an array of media that, and I wanted to go outside of only having painting or only having installation or video art or textiles. And I thought that by mixing the different media and textiles as well, I could show the different practices, for example, that they were addressing, like Suchitra does with the big tapestry that we saw at the beginning.
Thank you.
A question. Was there any cross-fertilization or influence with other non-Hispanic immigrants in the Americas, such as the Italian immigrant community in Argentina?
Oh, that's a great question, and I actually I want to tell you a story. When I began to study the Japanese migration to Argentina within our collection, my first approach was to see the Italian migration to Argentina and Brazil, because before they brought Japanese workers, they tried to bring Italian peasants to work the land, and that never worked, and that didn't succeed. And in our collection, we have quite a few works that speak to that migration. But in the case of the Japanese artists in Brazil, there was a cross-fertilization of that with the different art movements that were taking place in Brazil, and the fact that there were people going back and forth from Europe, and the kind of the kind of abstraction that they were doing was an abstraction that, for example, let me see who else that comes to my mind. Wait for me. I want to show you a specific piece of our permanent collection that can shed light into that. That is in this piece by Danilo Di Preti. He was painting in Brazil at the same time that Manabuma Be and Kazuo Kobayashi were painting in Brazil. And he was Italian. He was born in Italy and he spent a long period of his life in Brazil. So you can see the similarities in the kind of abstraction they were developing over there. So just to give you a quick example of a catalog that I had next to me.
Okay, how do I?
Go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, sure.
Sure. I have a question. Do you think that, first of all, I am so impressed with what I have seen so far in your presentations. The works are stunning and give a lot of thought provoking. But what I wonder is, do you feel that during this period of time that the Asians migrated to South America and Central America and Mexico, that culturally they had more freedom to express themselves and to integrate their culture and background into their arts in these countries than, let's say, the same Asians who migrated to the United States during that same period?
No, it's very similar. And actually, it is very similar in the fact that during World War II, they were persecuted here and there. It happened all over the place. It's not, they were subjected to the same kind of marginalization that was happening here. So I think that was a situation that happened across the Americas. And actually, in the last few years is when we are starting to see more our historians and curators doing this kind of exhibition. So we began this whole exhibition process in 2013 with an exhibition titled Fusion that traced those migrations in the collection of the Art Museum of the Americas. And then some years later, while we were developing cultural encounters in Los Angeles with the Pacific Standard Time Initiative of the Getty Foundation, two exhibitions were organized. One about the Chinese migration to the Caribbean, and another exhibition about the Japanese migration to Brazil and Peru and Argentina and Mexico. And what you see in those exhibitions is exactly the same sentiment that I tried to express here, and is the idea that these processes were really slow, and that despite the discriminations that they were subject to, and after generations, we can see the kind of artwork that we see here. And we have pieces that deal with post-colonial issues, like the Bernadette Persuadeau piece that I presented at the docent presentation. Suchitra Matai also deals with post-colonial issues, and those post-colonial issues are part of the fact that they were subjected to a difficult time as it happened in the United States.
Thank you.
So just to give you an example that is really interesting, Wilfredo Lam is the most important, or not important, I don't want to use the word important, well-known artist in this entire exhibition. His artwork is in the main galleries of MoMA with a very famous piece called The Jungle. He is at Tate Modern. He is in the Hirshhorn here in Washington National Gallery. And he was already pretty famous in the 1920s and 40s. And he was not allowed to come into the United States because of the US-Chinese restrictions. He was selling in New York, up and down, and he couldn't enter the United States. Just one example. So I think everything was across the continent.
Adriana, first of all, thank you. You have been so generous with your time and materials, and it's greatly appreciated. What is your thought process when you're putting together an exhibition like this? And how many works are in this exhibition?
Oh, this is I don't know the tally of this particular one. It's quite large, 70. Jessica, you know, after putting it, I right now.
I feel like I've heard the number 90, but I don't have the checklist in front of me, so I'm not sure either.
So this particular exhibition has been a tremendous effort. I've been working on it for 6 years.
Whoa.
To give you an example, I had 2 kids during the process, and one is 4 and the other one is 3. The photos that you see of me in the different studios and everything was after my first baby was born, and I was already pregnant with the other. But just this project has been huge. It's a project that involved an advisory committee that worked with me in the selection of the pieces, that they were really generous with their time. They came to Washington and sat with us, and they hear all my ideas. Let's do this, let's do that. Let's do the website, for example, how you're going to implement the website. It's going to be useful, and how we make it more useful for the users. So this particular project, it's my biggest project so far. And the selection process was lengthy. It took me a while. I didn't travel to all the countries. Some other person went to some other countries, and then we gathered the ideas. And then what was the right fit? And at some point I had to let go the idea that it had to be a uniform exhibition, that I had to use, as I mentioned before, only painting, or only installation, or only video, or only sculpture, and propose a more dynamic way to create an exhibition that talks about the migration, but it shows the array of works that are being created that speak to this particular part of history.
This is Jessica again, and I just wanted to say that the website that Adriana referenced and showed, I've put it into the chat box, so you can go and explore it. It's a really amazing website. I've also put in the chat box the way to book a ticket, excuse me, to come and see the show at the KIA. So you can book your tickets ahead of time. If you're a member, you enter your member discount code, which is member 2020, no spaces, capital M. But yeah, we are at 7:23, so we've got 7 more minutes before this program officially ends. Are there any other questions? I've been hearing really great questions so far.
one comment that I wanna say regarding the website is that this website is designed to be used while you are in the exhibition. So you can see more works and different works from the same artist. So if you see it from home, which is totally fine, you won't see the artwork that it's in the museum. And we did it on purpose, so everybody go to the museum and see the exhibition. And this is a resource to learn more about the artist.
Yeah, come to the museum. If anyone watching is in the Kalamazoo area and is worried about coming into the museum, we are fully COVID compliant. You'll have to wear a face mask inside the whole time. There will be a little very brief, non-invasive health questioning. We're being really careful about cleaning everything, just constantly sanitizing. So, you know, it's a very safe environment to come to, and a really nice place to come and feel some relief, perhaps, of any anxiety that might be in the outside world, to come and sit with art. You know, and just, there's such a variety of pieces in the show. The show is really amazing, and I really, really admire all of your work, Adriana.
Thank you very much, and I hope everyone enjoys it. The exhibition will be going to the San Antonio Museum of Art, and then it will come into the Art Museum of the Americas. So we are really happy to see it, because I haven't seen it in my in the real life. Just like Jessica showed me yesterday, the installation.
Karen wants to tell you that we are working with this show with our students.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And there's a few people on here I recognize as teaching artists that will be sharing this show with Kalamazoo public school students. And I was with one of the artists in the galleries yesterday, and she was expressing a lot of excitement about pieces in the show as well for students. Well, it is almost 7:30, and I think we had such a fantastic presentation tonight. We learned so much and got to see so many fabulous pieces of art. And one more shout out, do come and see it in the building, because you can see a work of art on a computer screen, and you can see a work of art on a piece of paper or in a catalog, but it's just not the same as getting to experience it in the galleries. And so much thanks to you, Adriana, for all of your work and all of the back and forth that you've been willing to do with me, and for the educational programming here at the KIA. I'm really excited for when you get to see it. And Karen has added, cannot wait to see this show in person. I appreciate your research.
Thank you. And any question that you have, anything that you want to know, I'm always here.
Oh, and Pablo is raising his hand.
Yeah, I'm Pablo Zuniga. I'm the former director of the museum, recently retired, but I can attest to the years of work that Adriana, as well as the entire team of the Art Museum. A shout out also to our friends at International Arts and Artists that saw the potential of bringing this show into the United States. As a first generation immigrant to the United States, it's so exciting to see how immigration is such a tapestry. And if you just take the issue of Asian migration to Latin America and how that now is coming to the United States, it's just so incredibly complex. And it shows you that there is no one Asian or one Latin American. It's just a rainbow of different cultures that have come together historically. And I think the exhibition shows that. by showing the difference and the similarities as well. We're very excited. I wish I could be in Kalamazoo to see the pieces. So I encourage everyone here, and I'm so excited about the docents that are going to be explaining this, and to the children that will be learning about this. So congratulations and kudos to Kalamazoo for seeing the value of an exhibition like this that highlights the complexity of immigration and cultures, and how artists are the best ambassadors of that. So thank you, congratulations, and very well done, Adriana.
Thank you, boss.
Oh, Paula, I think you're talking, but I muted you.
Is Adriana coming to Kalamazoo?
I might.
You should. You
Yes.
should.
Yes, we are trying to see if we put all the family in the car and we drive all the way there. Yeah, but that's the idea. I was very excited when Jessica showed me the galleries yesterday. I was like, no. Some of those works I haven't seen in person. So I'm gonna tell you the truth. The chair, the Flora Fong chair, I never realized the size of that work. And all of a sudden it's this magnificent work. So because when I visited her in Cuba, she didn't have that work there. That's a work that was in the United States. So it was very emotional for me to see some of those works.
Good, good.
Well, that would be really exciting. It would be fantastic to meet you in person.
Yes, the same. We're gonna make it happen.
Okay, well, everybody, thank you so much for coming out. Thank you for your time. Again, Adriana, thank you so much for your incredible research, your incredible show. So excited to be able to share it with Kalamazoo. And unless you would like to end it with one final word, it's 7:31. So
my final word is go and see the show. That's all what I want to say. Enjoy it, read all the text. It's a lot, but it's really interesting, and get to know these artists that are amazing. And when you come to Washington, D.C., please visit the Art Museum of the Americas. We are not open yet, but you can follow us on our social media.
I think that's a really great way to say goodnight to everybody.
Okay.
So good night, everybody.
Good night. Thank you, Jessica.
Thank you.